there's two schools of thought, I think, when you think about startups. There's the Google school of thought, and of course they've obviously done incredibly well, and so it's kind of proven that this way of doing things can work, which is engineers build something absolutely incredible, and it shouldn't even need salespeople. It should just sell itself. Some people should just come to the site, sign up, and if you do need salespeople, they are like not put front and center, let's just say. Whereas another school of thought is like, well, we have a decent product. I think we compete with everybody else pretty well, but let's supercharge the salespeople. Let's put them front and center. Let's really cheer on every deal that they bring in. Let's encourage them to get bigger and bigger deals. Let's take the top 10 salespeople to a exotic island, when they get the top sales. And that's more of a sales culture. And I don't know, I think you could do both in a sense. I mean, you could also balance the two. But I mean, there's two extremes. One is complete sales culture, and one is like a complete engineering culture. And others are like, let's try and balance all that. When the engineers release a nice product, they also go to a nice, island or something like that. And maybe it's not an island, maybe it's just to, a nice place to eat or something. You know what I mean? So just try to reward the sales, try and put them front and center, or at least on the same page or same table as engineers. Because sometimes, especially in tech companies, it's usually founded by engineers and controlled by engineers or controlled by technical people, and so the salespeople may not get sort of the attention perhaps that they deserve. And I'm just saying perhaps it should be more equal, and perhaps it should also be more front and center of the organization, in terms of also, instead of, you see a lot of startups come up with sort of like, let people come to the site and then just sign up, $99, $199, $299, gold, silver, platinum, and then they just sit back and like say, okay, let's wait for the money to be counted. Usually you're not getting the full value for the product, because what enterprise salespeople tend to do is, you don't even necessarily have a rate card. You go into every single client, you understand what the value of your proposition is to that client, and then you help them calculate it. So, I was just talking earlier today something about this kind of thing. You might have a price optimization solution, for instance, and you're selling to a $4 billion grocery store. And with your price optimization solution, they could sell their products for 40 million more. Okay, so 4 billion, they add 40 million more on their top line because of your product, and you say, okay, I'll just take 10%, I'll take 4 million. Whereas if you don't solution sell it like that, you might sell it for $10,000. And so, you're not getting your share of the value of that product if you don't have that enterprise sales culture. And so you can sell yourself very, very short. Every market's a little bit different. For instance, when you talk about Asia as a whole, you have Australia on one end of the spectrum that's, it's been called California with kangaroos. And then there's also like China on the other end of the spectrum that has different market completely, different ways of doing business, different ways of paying, and you really have to I still think it gets back to what value though are you providing that local market, and trying to prove it to the customer that value. So there is that undercurrent. I used to be told it's sort of like a 70-30 rule. So 70% is not changed by any market. So whether you're in Japan or China or Australia, it's still that 70%, whether it's DoubleClick or anything else. But 30% should be adjusted to that market, depending on the different culture. Now, again, Australia, maybe it's 10%. And China might be, sort of closer to 50% needs to be changed. But that's kind of like just a rule of thumb. Certainly from a sales perspective, like an enterprise salesperson, you really kind of have to be conscious of, like in Singapore, nobody ever wears a suit jacket, and so don't even bring it. Just nobody wears one. Whereas in Japan, people still wear suit and ties to all their meetings. So I mean, there's those kind of standard things that you learn over the years in each of the countries that you do business with as an enterprise salesperson. But then there's other sort of more technical things, like Chinese don't put tags on their site. I mean, it's very difficult. Japanese are somewhat reluctant to that, whereas Southeast Asia, Australia, they don't even have an issue. So there's certain other things like technical norms that you also have to be aware of with each particular country. But that's what makes it interesting, isn't it? Well, I think in general, marketing is a new art for Asia as a whole. I mean, whether it's Taiwan or greater, China or Southeast Asia. I mean, this idea of, they understand marketing because they've been marketed too. I mean, you look at how Apple markets itself, or you look at how BMW markets itself. I mean, these, Coke or Pepsi or McDonald's. I mean, they understand that concept. But really kind of, especially in the technology area, it's so classically been, or even clothes or it's so classically been OEM, original equipment manufacturer. I mean, we make stuff for people. So the branding comes from the US or France or somewhere else. The design comes from US, France, or somewhere else, and we just kind of like make it to their order. Now, of course, there's companies that are coming out and owning that branding and design themselves, and you're just beginning to see some traction in those areas. Whether it's a Taiwan company or otherwise. I mean, there's some breakthroughs. I mean, certainly HTC has done a good job, outside of Taiwan. Certainly all of the bike companies, in terms of Giant or Specialized or otherwise, have done well. But I still think that there's a long way to go. I mean, there's just that look and feel, that attention. There's a tendency to put more money, like if I have $1, I'll spend another $1 on the engineering rather than spending that $1 on the marketing, making it look good, making your brand look good, making your logo look good, hiring a copywriter to make sure that there's not typos. I mean, sometimes that's because they're, maybe perhaps the company is not, that's not their strength or the knowledge that they have. But then they tend to put that aside. But in some sense, that's just as important as making sure the technical aspects work well. I mean, I would say that when you look at the history of whether it's a SaaS firm or a software company, tends to not be the first mover. It tends to be the one that marketed themselves better. So you look at Salesforce and the way Mark Benoit markets Salesforce. When you look at Larry Ellison and the way he markets Oracle, he's done an amazing job. When Bill Gates came out with DOS, and it certainly wasn't the first operating system, but it's the way he marketed it and sold it to IBM and others. Same with Office. So Excel wasn't the first spreadsheet software, Lotus 123 was, and others. Word wasn't the first word processor, WordPerfect was. But he bundled together and he marketed the hell out of it, and he won the market, even though it wasn't the best. So I think it's important to understand that it doesn't, don't let perfect get in the way of good, as they say. I mean, you gotta get out there, you gotta put more money in marketing, and it's very rare case. I mean, Google's almost an anomaly where engineering, can take a company that far. I think it's just more about refinement. So understanding your customer, understanding where you need to be at, looking at the landscape around, and just showing how you can be a global company. I mean, when you look at how a French company or a American company or a Japanese company even, or markets themselves and refines themselves globally, And I just believe that Taiwan's, I mean, you shouldn't, we're a global world today. I mean, there's so many books written about this ever since like The World is Flat, but many others since then about like nation is not important. I mean, there's 200 nations in the world, but it's almost globalizing to the point where the nation is secondary. And in some ways, it just needs to hit a global standard of look and feel and what people expect. And it's incidental that it's from Taiwan necessarily. So I think it's just to take it to that level. And we know, that the people in Taiwan can do that. So I'm excited to see, since there's a lot of potential for growth here and a lot of potential for global growth.